Welcome back to Community Planning Conversations. I have two more guests as a continuation of our morning conversation. One of my guests is going to be doing a presentation tomorrow at the Passive House conference, and my other guest is a participant at the conference. To my right is Rachel Wagner, and she is from Duluth, Minnesota, and Linda Wigington, who is from Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. I'm going to let both of them, before we get into the conversation, tell you a bit about themselves and what have brought them to the Passive House conference, and then we're going to talk about how to save energy, and both of them are very concerned about how you reduce energy use in a house, so that will be the focus of our conversation. Rachel, tell us a bit about yourself and your practice at Duluth.
Okay, I am one of the owners of Wagner's on Architecture, a small architecture and design firm in Duluth, Minnesota. We specialize in community-based and residential architecture with a focus on low energy, sustainable building practices. I have been aware of Passive House for about the last 5 or 6 years and have been designing very low energy buildings and establishing certain metrics and measurements of them for about that long. And I was at the first Passive House US conference last year in Wigington, Minnesota. So I was excited about the second one here in Urbana and the creation of FIAS, the Passive House Institute of the US.
And you've been a practicing architect since?
I've been practicing architecture since about 1987, so about 20 years.
And your degree is from?
My degree is from Cornell University in design.
And Linda is, I've invited Linda because of the organization that she's associated with. Please tell the viewers about your organization.
I work for Affordable Comfort Inc., ACI. It's a nonprofit based in southwestern Pennsylvania, but we serve all of North America, Canada, and the United States. We're primarily geared towards developing supporting the development of the infrastructure of people that are needed in order to work on homes to make them more efficient, comfortable, healthy, and safe. So we put on conferences and training events. We have an annual conference every year that's in our 22nd year, and we have put on probably 30 or 40 regional conferences in that time. But they're primarily geared to building and housing professionals who then serve the folks who obviously everyone who lives in homes or are buying a new home.
And as I understand, you just very recently had your conference in San Francisco. Is that accurate?
We actually had a very special event. It's called the ACI Summit, Moving Existing Homes Towards Carbon Neutrality. An awful lot of the focus of our conference has been just how to do things well, how to put together what needs to be put together in order for a house to function. So much of the focus has always been that it's incorrect, that, gee, all I need is the right product. If I have the right product, the house will work. And the focus of ACI's conference has always been you've got to look at the house as a system. Well, we recently made a sort of shift in our way. I particularly made a shift in the way I was looking at things and recognizing that just making the very solid energy improvements that you can in existing or new home are not enough. And obviously with the change in prices of oil, the questions about the long-term availability of fuels, the incredible impact of the environmental effect of the energy we use, and the changing climate just sort of throw everything that we've assumed about how our homes use energy in question. So the summit that we had in San Francisco brought together 100 people from the United States and Canada to explore creating a new vision of what's possible in terms of reducing energy use in existing homes. And I think that sort of the key nugget is, I think, well, many people assume that if they've got a home, there's not much they can do if they've already done certain things, if they already have certain products in place. That the the vision that we're trying to put forth with the summit and with the work that we're doing now is to redefine what's possible so somebody with an existing home realizes that it's a treasure. And it's not just something to be discarded, it's not obsolete, that we actually can make major changes to existing homes so that they're continue to be an incredibly valuable resource.
That will lead us into what we want to talk about, but I don't want to lose the opportunity for our viewers for you to explain a bit. You use the term carbon neutral, and if you could just briefly explain, so as you both go on and talk about how to reduce this, they get a better understanding.
Well, all energy we use, particularly fossil fuel energy we use, contributes to carbon emissions, and there are many aspects of our lives, so I'm sure many people have actually explored and gone onto a website to calculate their carbon footprint. The building sector is only one part of one's carbon footprint, but it's a significant part. 20% of the energy used in the United States and 20% of our carbon emissions are from the fossil fuel consumption of our homes. Not counting the embodied energy, but the energy that's coming in as fuels and as electricity, indirectly electricity through coal. So the whole idea of carbon neutrality is to be able to make changes in the way that we use energy so that we are no longer having a negative impact on carbon emissions as ACI is focusing on the way that we use energy in buildings. That's only one small part, and it's very important that people look at all aspects of their life: food production, transportation, the materials they use, the water they use, and recognize that buildings are one piece of that.
And again, you use another term, but I'll ask Rachel to maybe talk about that. And you talked about embodied energy, and maybe our viewers don't quite understand what you mean by that.
Embodied energy is the total energy associated with the use of a material or a product. In housing we talk about it, or in buildings we talk about it in a building. And that means the energy that it took to extract the materials from their natural source, if you were extracting materials, or the energy it took to produce the material you were going to use in a house, like a piece of siding or a piece of steel, a piece of insulation. It's also the energy that it takes to transport that material to the site where it's going to be used, or even the plant where it's going to be created into something else and then again transported to the site where you're going to use it. It also accounts for the waste generated and disposal of the waste associated with both creating the material and at some point disposing of the material at the end of its useful life. These are really big and deep numbers, and in a sense concepts that most people are not entirely familiar with, and it shouldn't really daunt homeowners or people who work in any sort of business or building from thinking a little more simply, however, about buildings, your homes, the places you work in, and the associated CO2 emissions with them. And Linda mentioned that it is just one piece of the total carbon dioxide emissions that any person is sort of personally responsible for in the U.S. But buildings are a very significant portion. When scientists, politicians, economists look at global warming and the human contributions to CO2, they typically divide CO2 emissions into three sectors. And those three sectors are industry, transportation, and buildings. Building operation alone in the U.S. accounts for about 39% of all CO2 emissions. Of that 39%, the residential sector is about 21%, so that's that 21% that Linda was talking about. But when you look at buildings as a whole, we all go shopping in them, we go to work in them, we live in them. Just the operation of buildings accounts for 39% of U.S. associated CO2 emissions annually. If you take and add embodied energy and the transportation of materials to buildings, to that sector, you can kind of recalibrate that pie, so to speak. And in that case, buildings, creation of buildings, maintenance of buildings, and operation of buildings accounts for nearly half of all CO2 emissions in the U.S. So the choices that we make in reducing energy use from fossil fuels and the associated, so every time you use these fossil fuels, you have associated CO2 emissions with them. So every time you can reduce that in buildings, you're chipping away at that piece of the pie that really equates to nearly half of all CO2 emissions.
So between the two of you, it makes me then want to ask the question, it's very important for us then to think about how well the buildings are built originally, and those people who buy something and just scrape it down to build something bigger and better. Do I understand your explanations? That comes into play too. It's not just the new buildings, but
That's
it's
right.
Yes.
it's if we decide to tear this building down that we're sitting in right now to build something new, then it may not actually cost less to build a new building, because if we added in all of the embodied energy that we're surrounded by, then that cost becomes much higher because it's been a cost to us as,
That's
you know,
correct.
right?
So if you live in a 100-year-old home, the embodied energy within that existing home today is very, very low. You can take some of those numbers off the table, and then you can add if the structure is good. And this is what Linda's group really focuses on.
Thinking about the whole picture, then, is what you're talking about. Now, at lunch, you were explaining to me some of the things that you're doing in designing to reduce the load. Talk about that a little bit more, and maybe talk about how you're using the term load so our viewers understand.
Sure. We talk about the load in buildings as the energy needed to operate the home. And in most homes, the energy needed to heat and cool the home are the primary energies that we look at. However, the energy needed to just run all things electronic in the home, your refrigerator, your dishwashers, all of your lights, all of the many electronics now that a lot of people have come to desire for convenience, all of those have an associated load, and that's a load in energy. We measure that sometimes in watts or in kilowatt hours, or in something called BTUs, British thermal units, if you're talking about heating and cooling. We can measure those for a given building, and all of those loads, if you look at the energy source used to meet those loads, there are associated CO2 emissions with that. So we can actually equate the amount of energy a building needs, how we're going to meet those needs, and then look at the applicable measurement of the amount of emissions that you are avoiding or causing with that house or building. And for some of the new construction, but this is applicable to existing homes as well, if you take a very thorough and aggressive approach, we're designing and building houses right now that use anywhere from half to a fourth or even less, about 20% of the energy from fossil fuels that an average home or a conventional home would use. So we can and are achieving the kinds of dramatic reductions in energy use and associated CO2 emissions that climate scientists and now politicians are calling for.
And since we're building so many homes, it seems to be a really efficient way of going about cutting down our energy use. Not just going around and putting compact fluorescent bulbs in. This is a really dramatic change you're talking about.
You know, to put just one small example on something like that, if you drove, let's say roughly an average car about 12,000 miles per year, you might be putting somewhere between 12,000 and 20,000 pounds of carbon into the year, or into the air per year, depending upon the efficiency of your car. If you switched and bought a Prius, you would probably reduce the CO2 emissions from your driving of that car for a year to, let's say, about 5,000 pounds of CO2. We can make similar comparisons with houses, and we're designing houses right now where the associated emissions of the house are, for everything, all of the energy uses, are about, in a year, what it would be for driving that Prius. So we sort of call it a house like a Prius.
Oh, very, very good.
One
Yes.
thing I'd like to
Yes,
comment on
please.
is with new construction, there's tremendous opportunity to make homes far more efficient. And partly the key difference between new construction and having an existing home is at the point that you're building a home new, you've got the option of having everything integrated, or so like you're starting from scratch, you're starting from a ground floor, so you've got more flexibility in putting together a package that makes a whole lot of sense. But interestingly, the average energy use of new homes in this country is not lower than existing homes. It's lower if you look at it on a per square foot basis. In other words, our new homes are more efficient per square foot, but our new homes are increasingly larger. And our new homes tend to use.
I'm laughing because it's so true.
Well, it's you look at the graphs, it's pretty scary because while energy use per square foot's coming down nicely, and the number of square feet is going up, and then the number of people per house is going down. So the average right now, the average is 800 square feet per person in new construction in the U.S. And in the 1950s or 40s, it was more like 200 to 250 square feet per person. Did I say that right? 800 square feet per person.
You did.
And the misconception that, oh, I've got this old junker of a house, it's just this little thing, it's 50 years old, it's 80 years old, I should tear it down and build something efficient. And meanwhile, usually when people tear something down and build something more efficient, they make it twice as big. And it would probably turn out to use just as much, if not more, energy, unless you're building square foot per square foot, something the same size. Now, the best thing is to go and build something that more people can live in. Build a house that's has connected dwelling space, so that you're getting a much higher occupancy for the same number of square feet. But oftentimes that's not what people are doing. So I think it's a major misconception that the solution is to build new. If you look at what's going to happen in the year 2050, 60% of the homes that are here now are still going to be here. And in 2000, and that's based on projections that were before the new home construction market went bust. So when you consider that, it might even be higher than 60% of those homes are still here, and are the opportunity for tremendous investment.
Two things immediately came to mind. The old saw about people going out and buying these very good energy efficient refrigerators. However, they don't improve themselves because the old one goes in the garage.
Yeah.
And then the housing you were talking, yes, the bigger house, and the housing you were talking about, just happened to visit Greendale, Wisconsin. And for the viewers, Greendale, Wisconsin is one of 3 green communities built during the Roosevelt administration. And we were walking through there. It's a planned community built by the government, and those houses are 800 square feet. So if you
Only 5 people lived in them.
I can't vouch for that, but
Yeah.
Very much reinforcing your comment about the growth curve on the square footage of houses. This is very important. So how do we go about sharing this knowledge beyond the fact that we're taping this program right at the moment to share what you two know, but how do we get it further out to those people who are the decision makers and who have the vote on city councils and planning commissions and the ones who say yes to the developers who come in and want to build these large places, which is not only the sprawl, but then it's the transportation issue because it's stretching out.
There is a move afoot. It's called progressive energy efficiency, and the notion is that that local governments probably do not want to ban large homes. I mean, politically, that probably wouldn't go over. However, somebody who can afford to build a large house probably can afford to make that house even more energy efficient than the person who's building a small home. And the challenge would be to make sure we've removed the barriers that keep people from building small houses, because there are many barriers at the local level that actually prevent small homes or prevent building houses for a variety, unrelated people to live together. But the notion of progressive energy efficiency is that a code might say that if you build a house more than 3,500 square feet, that home cannot use any more energy than a home would use if it is 3,500 square feet. So you can build a 7,000 square foot house, but it can't use any more than the lower amount. And that takes care of part of the problem, because that would cause that buyer to invest in a much higher level of efficiency. But still, the plug loads, the electrical loads, are really critical. And the electrical loads are the things that you bring and put in your house. And the bigger the house, the rule of thumb, actually, the amazing thing is, they were looking at, well, what's the biggest predictor of energy use in homes? And most people would say, well, climate, cold weather, climate, it's got to be climate. Well, lo and behold, it's not climate, it's the square footage of your house, because the bigger the house, the more stuff you've got in it. So even if we've got progressive energy efficiency, even if we have codes at the local level that help to make sure that we're achieving higher levels of efficiency, and that the larger house isn't committing to a lifetime of using more resources from a shell, from an envelope standpoint, from heating and cooling, there's still the challenge of the energy use of those buildings from the standpoint of the electricity.
Speaker after, yes, please do, because speaker after speaker just talked about that very issue.
Right. And if people want to get their heads around this, I think more, or you may have sort of asked, what can be done, or how can the word be spread? The word can be spread in a few ways. One is to talk to your legislators at the local level, and write and call your legislators at the state and federal level. Talk to them, get their ear, let them know that you're interested, that you're paying attention, that you care, that you want to see legislation happen. But talking about it at the local level means talking about it to your local politicians and to your neighbors and your friends. Bring it to the forefront. Talk to everybody you know about it if you care about it. Become a little more educated, read a little bit about it, and really, again, impress upon those legislators. The second thing that most average people can do about that to get the word out is, as you are making changes in your life, tell other people about what you're doing. It can be daunting, but there are a few kind of straightforward things that people can do to start to understand. If you ask most people how many miles per gallon your automobile gets, they can tell you. They can tell you the miles per gallon of each car that they own. Find out if most people can tell you how much electricity they use monthly, how many kilowatt hours. If you don't know how many you use, find out. Check your electric bills. Check them for a year and see, are there spikes? Are there different amounts that you're using? And then set a goal for reducing your own personal consumption. Start with electricity, maybe start with heating oil, and think about ways to reduce that, and then watch your bills. You can measure your own reductions in consumption, and it's pretty exciting.
And I thought I heard you talk about not just that aspect, but water usage. And how often you run errands, or are you chaining your errands so that it's efficient drive, and some of those aspects. I picked up a white paper that you have supplied for all of the conference attendees, and this, I think, came out of the
BCAC.
Do you want to talk a little bit more? And then I noticed there's a website. I assume it's posted on the website, so the viewers can then go and look at it in a little bit more detail.
Well, the summit the white paper was a summary of the output of the ACI summit, and there were some key conclusions. One is that it's a huge opportunity. but it's an incredible challenge to reduce energy use by 70 to 90%. The assumption, the framework, the assumption of the ACI Summit was that we were focusing on existing homes, and we're focusing on the potential to reduce energy use through both technical interventions as well as behavioral choices. So we wanted to be very clear that we were not just talking about the technical fix, we were talking about the potential for lifestyle to make a difference. And the conclusion was deep energy reductions are possible now. We don't need any super duper technology that doesn't exist, though it would be a whole lot easier with systems in place. And there are a number of things that we lack. I'll just actually review the, I think the key there were a number of comments that I heard in feedback, and I think the thing that had the most profound impact on our participants was the recognition that even though deep energy reductions are practical now, that many steps that we take that are well-intentioned, that are designed to reduce our energy use, may be dead ends. They may be very cost-effective. They may be very logical things to do to reduce our energy use by 20%, 30%, maybe even 40%. But from the standpoint of achieving the much higher level of reductions that are necessary from a global standpoint in terms of environmental impact, ironically, there are some things that actually are on the path to get you to deep energy reductions, while other things can be a barrier. And I think a really great example is people are often upgrading their heating system. At the time they upgrade their heating system, it's very typical to add central air conditioning because you think, oh, get rid of those room air conditioners, they're such a pain. And many times the heating contractor will say, because he's got good experience in knowing this, that, well, if you really want the second floor to be comfortable, we really need to put ducts in your attic. Well, if you just think of the combination, if you're changing a heating system to save energy, but then you're adding central air, you're probably cooling a larger area than you were before. You're probably not going to save anything over those room air conditioners. You could have been better off just replacing those old room air conditioners with more efficient ones and keep the areas comfortable that you need. But as soon as you decide to put ducts in your attic, you're poking holes in your ceiling, you're making your house leakier, you're introducing the potential for pressure effects, you're putting ductwork in the world's worst place to put ductwork for air conditioning because the attic's the hottest place. And here you're running ducts that don't really have that much insulation in an attic. So that's a perfect example of what looks like an improvement. You might be putting in a high efficiency system, but you're really lowering the efficiency of your overall house system. So alternatives to that would be maybe not even invest in and maybe not even put off changing your furnace. If your furnace is still working fine, you might instead invest in making your house tighter, increasing the insulation levels. A perfect opportunity for doing the deep energy retrofits is at the point that you've got to do a new roof or you need to do siding. You can actually add 2 or 4 or 6 inches of insulation outside of your walls and greatly increase the R value of those walls. I'm not saying that's practical to do if you've got brick or if you've got perfectly good siding. You probably aren't going to tear your siding off to do that, but there are opportunities, and the key is to recognize the opportunities as they come. And at each opportunity you have and each investment you have, don't look at it in that isolation, but instead look at it as part of a system and look at how you can move not just to a deeper level of efficiency at that point, but also keep your options open for moving to a carbon neutral home in the future by making those steps in ways that they're going to give you more options for deeper efficiency, not fewer options for deeper efficiency. So that was probably the biggest aha that people who came to the summit went away with, was even though many of us are involved in programs that don't have the resources to finance really high level of energy efficiency from the standpoint of the R values and the things we're talking about, the issue is, well, gee, we're investing in incredible amounts of energy efficiency, and how can we shift these to make sure that we're not losing our flexibility and our options in the future.
Would you please share the URL for your?
Sure.
Yeah.
The Affordable Comfort has a number of resources on our website. Actually, they're handouts from all of our past or our previous 3 or 4 years worth of past conferences are there, and you can just click on past events. So if you go to our website, click on past events, select the ACI Summit, you'll be able to look at the ACI white paper and other things that were presented at that session, at that event. And our website is affordablecomfort.org. So it's www.affordablecomfort.org.
Now you also have a website for your business. If I haven't had a chance to go to it, so I'm asking, if I go to it, do you have suggestions and ideas and maybe some guidelines that if I want to come to you as a client to get me thinking about things?
That's a great question. We've talked about that for quite some time, and we haven't developed it yet on our website, the resource page. However, if you do go to our website, which is just wagnerzaun.com,
And
Wagner, WAGNERZAUN, you will see one of our projects, which is the Eco Home in Duluth. And the Eco Home, we developed a website for that. That's probably a more important one for homeowners to go to. There are a lot of resources that we created on that website that you can download in PDF files, all about reducing energy load in homes, why it's important, why now, how we approached it, different issues about insulation, heating systems, domestic hot water, renewable energy technologies. So there's a lot of information on that website, and that website is www.ecohomeduluth.com, and that's all one word, ecohomeduluth.com.
Well, that'd be excellent. And even if I see this and I live in Florida, and I look at that, the concepts are generalized. The construction would vary because you're in the northern climates and I would be much further south, but it still would be extremely helpful for me. Well, one of the things, I'd like to go back to the appliances and the load in the house. I guess I had never realized definitively how difficult it is to reduce that load, and that seemed to have come out very clearly in a number of the talks today. Reducing the load of insulation, reducing the energy use, but the appliances and miscellaneous. And so talk about that a little bit more as I run home and unplug all the radios or don't turn the television on or something like that.
Some of what you were hearing today were speakers talking about modeling those loads, how difficult it is in our energy calculations when we're not dealing with a building that's already full of equipment to make assumptions about what's going to be in the homes. So there's a difference between personally reducing your electrical consumption based on appliances and what we struggle with in some of our modeling analysis. In terms of your personal loads, though, it's important for people to begin to understand the concept of what are called phantom loads. That's the little clock that's on your microwave all the time, even when you're not using the microwave or the oven. That's the energy that's pulled from the grid simply to keep your cell phone charger or your camera battery charger always in the socket. If you simply pull those things out of the socket and you only put your cell phone charger in the socket when you want to charge your cell phone, and you pull it out as soon as the light turns green, that will make a difference. Televisions are another big one, but an interesting thing about TVs and radios are that people keep them on a lot, even when they're not in the room, even when they're not watching them. It's almost become background noise, and there's what we call an energy penalty associated with that. In terms of the bigger appliances, there's a lot of really good information available right now if you are going to be buying a new appliance soon. One is, I want to call it ACEEE.org, ACEEE, and I'm not going to be able to remember what the
American Council for an
an
Energy
energy efficient economy. That's right.
But if people remember ACEEE, they could find it on the
ACEEE.org
internet.
has a lot of really useful fact sheets based on residential appliances. Another thing that people can do right now for about the next month is to go to the bookstore and buy the current special issue of Fine Home Building magazine. It's their annual issue about kitchens and baths. But this year they have an article in the magazine written by a man named Alex Wilson about the energy efficiencies of kitchens. It is an excellent article. It's easy for anybody to read and understand. It gives very specific details about associated energy consumption with all of the things we typically use in our kitchens. And some of the information is surprising, like how much energy your dishwasher uses. So I really recommend the current special issue of Fine Home Building magazine.
And the article is by?
The article is written by Alex Wilson. He is the editor of a more technical publication called Environmental Building News. He's also the editor, or the writer of a relatively new book about green building. Is it just called Your Home, or Greening Your Home?
Yeah, something like that.
But he really is an authority. He has been well regarded in the environmental and energy building industry for many, many years. And this 4-page article in Fine Home Building is just full of great information.
And
I wanted to add to that.
please do, yes.
It's sort of the good news and the bad news is, the good news is there's a tremendous opportunity for homeowners, consumers, renters to make a tremendous impact in their energy use just by using things wisely and not how they operate their home. It's been proven time and time and time again. You can have the exact same house, the exact same stuff, and a 2-to-1 difference in energy use. It's huge. Most people aren't aware how much their behavior affects that energy use. But the interesting thing is, in addition to what Rachel said, that a lot of people just aren't aware of how what they use is affecting something else in the house. And the fact that every single thing that you use in your house that's electrical is going to end up producing that much energy in the form of heat. And it's so typical. This is absolutely one of the biggest energy wastes that's so easy to fix is there's this major misconception that ceiling fans cool a house. Ceiling fans do not cool a house. They make you more comfortable if you're in the room. Ceiling fans typically use about 75 watts of energy, but I don't know how many houses, the saturation of ceiling fans is incredible, and most people are putting them in every room in their house, and some people, because they want to save energy, run those ceiling fans 24/7. Well, just think about it. Let's say if you've got 7 ceiling fans using 75 watts apiece, do the math real quickly, that's at least a half a kilowatt hour, right? Per hour, times 12, or times 24, so that'd be 12 kilowatt hours a day in heat being generated. Now, a space heater, full tilt, a space heater is 1.5 kilowatt hours per day, or per hour. So those ceiling fans is like, the heat that they're putting out in your house is going to be like running an electric space heater for 4 or 5 hours. And now, absolutely, when you're in a room, turn on the ceiling fan. When you're not in the room, turn it off. Same way with lights, same way with TV. If you just think about every single thing that's on during hot weather, and the fact that that's not just producing light, producing music, producing noise, whatever, but you're just religious about turning things off, you'd be amazed at how much difference that would make in the comfort of your house. And you get double savings because you're not only reducing the energy use it's taking, you're also making it cooler. Power strips are a neat thing to use if you've got a bunch of stuff plugged in. Just plug it into a power strip, and that way all you have to do is click that power strip off when you leave or you're no longer in the room. You don't have to unplug or turn things off. They even have smart power strips now so that you can put one thing in that's going to remember what time it is. It's going to give a trickle of charge to whatever's charged in the one end of the power strip, but the rest of the power will go off completely. So there's absolutely incredible amount of things you do. What I do is I read my meter every day when I'm home, and I've got it down pat. I know exactly what's causing my meter to run, and And it's amazing because I consider myself pretty knowledgeable, but when I started doing that, I found things that surprised me. And we've all got the feedback device. We could all go out and read our meter. I write it down, and I'm down to, in most days, I use 3 to 4 kilowatt hours a day, which is much less than average. But everybody's got the potential to make a tremendous impact. And just think of that energy being wasted, the dollars being wasted, and emissions being generated that we'll never be able to take back, that are going to affect our lives, our kids' lives, and everybody else on Earth's lives.
And you mentioned the book during one of the sessions. Would you share that with the viewers and the author of that book?
The book I mentioned is called How Buildings Learn by Stuart Brand. It'll be of interest to some people. It will be very dry and boring to a lot of other people. I'm not sure if I would recommend it to the masses, but if you're what I call an energy geek or a building geek or even a history buff, especially about the history of housing in America, or buildings in general in America, it's an excellent read. How Buildings Learn by Stuart Brand.
And a new thing is happening in our area, and I want to ask if it's already in place in your part of the United States, and is we are being offered the opportunity by an organization to choose to have our energy usage charged by the hour. And we can get a printout as to what the cost is at the different times, and we can do it for the day ahead. Is that an option in your part of the United States, and are you doing it?
What you're referring to is a demand meter, which then allows you to be charged not just based on how much you use, but the time of day that you use it, because actually some kilowatt hours cost many times more than other kilowatt hours. So it's having that, and I don't have it in the utility that I have right now, but having that option can be beneficial. In some cases, though, depending on the rate structure, you might not actually save, but you can often save a lot if you're somebody who's got the flexibility to make it work for your household. So if you can shift your load towards the lower pricing hours, then you've got a great ability to take advantage of the lowest energy cost kilowatt hours. And the more successful you are, the more motivated you are to do that, the better the option it is. So it definitely, it's very important not just to think about the fact that the environmental costs of the electricity we use is not just the coal that's being generated, it's not just the amount that's flowing as we use it, it's also having the capacity. And really, capacity is a major problem where I live right now. They're talking about putting in major power lines, and there's all kinds of opposition to those power lines, a major corridor across Virginia, Maryland, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And that's a tremendous cost. And if we reduce the loads, we would build, increase our flexibility so we didn't need to build the capacity.
Indeed. You both have shared a tremendous amount of information for our viewers, and I do want to remind our viewers how fortunate we are to be here in Champaign-Urbana, and to remind them that there's tremendous resources at the university where they can get a lot of information concerning all of the broad aspects of passive houses and all the energy issues that both Linda and Rachel talked about, so you think about it in the whole concept, not just the individual house, and to remind them that the Building Research Council is also available to the public and the libraries at the university. Linda and Rachel, how fortunate we are that you are here in the community and attending the conference, and you both had time to have a conversation with me today. And thank you for watching Community Planning Conversations. Remember, planning matters.